Hello. Today we're going to do a very quick overview of apartheid in South Africa. So, an introduction, South Africa is a multiracial society made up of many different ethnic groups. In South Africa, these groups were known as Blacks, Whites, Coloreds, and Asians. The group Asians actually refers to workers from India, but we'll get into a little bit more specifics of what these groups, who the people, the demographics were that were included in this. And it's important to note that before 1994, it was illegal for the group known as Blacks to vote or hold office. So for nearly 50 years, the whites ruled the country under a policy called apartheid. So basically from when South Africa became an official country in 1910, then to where they make it actual law a few decades later. And then we have this long period all the way up until 1994, where it's a legal separateness, basically legal racial segregation. And the group known as the Blacks had very few economic resources and very little political power. So you might think that because the group known as whites had so much power, you'd think maybe they're the majority of the population, but that is not so. The majority is actually the South African Blacks. So looking at the geography of South Africa, it is a country on the tip of Africa, and it is the most economically developed African country. It's going to be higher in the stages of demographic transition than other countries of Africa. It's very rich in minerals. It has a great climate where cash crops can be grown, so a lot of valuable resources to make this a coveted area. So basically, like going way back to the origins, the group known as African Blacks would be the group that was indigenous to the land, as far as we know, been there for many, many, thousands of years. And the first whites to come were actually Dutch settlers, colonists, farmers, and then eventually more white colonists come over from Europe as well. And then the group known as the Coloreds, and you'll see it spelled different ways. Sometimes there's a U there. They were the descendants of when, South African Blacks and South African whites married and had children. And then the Asians come a little bit later. And like I said, they are Indians, from India, and they are there to work for the whites. So South Africa's colonial period ends in 1910. South Africa becomes a new country. And then this new constitution makes, in 1948, make apartheid an official government policy. And it basically legally segregates everything: neighborhoods, schools, hospitals, trains, buses, every component of society that you can think of. So it was kind of a different quality of life depending on what group you were in. The whites lived very well. They had the best schools, jobs, healthcare, almost all the power. Now the Asians and coloreds, South Africans, were treated as second-class citizens. They did not have nearly the same opportunities or good schools as the group known as white South Africans. And the group known as the Blacks were treated very poorly. They actually were made to move out of where they lived, off their property, and go to what they called homelands, but really it was slums. And the whites took the best properties for themselves. There were very few jobs, very few resources, very poor schools, crumbling schools, and very poor hospitals. So you can imagine tension builds. This is, personal opinion, completely wrong. And so it's really a like combination of factors. Definitely the South African people and from all groups, really, and the international community. A huge component was Nelson Mandela being released from prison. And finally, lots of details skipping over, but on May 9th, 1994, the newly elected and now racially mixed South African parliament elects Nelson Mandela as the first president of the nation's post-apartheid era.